The story begins with a man swimming in the ocean. While swimming, he noticed an old chest floating nearby. When he opened the chest, some items spilled out. Among them was a green mask. Next, we see Stanley. He works at a bank. He told a female colleague, "I have 2 tickets, one for a really big show. Do you want to come with me?" But the girl replied that she had a friend who loves such shows. She flirted a little with Stanley and then asked for both tickets. Poor Stanley, being so straightforward, gave her both tickets and didn't even go to the show himself. As soon as the girl left, Stanley's friend came over and said, "Man, when are you going to learn? You never realize people take advantage of you and leave." At that moment, a stunningly beautiful girl named Tina entered the bank. Stanley and his friend were completely blown away. Tina placed her bag on the table and started talking to Stanley, saying she wanted to open a new account at the bank. But the truth was that Tina's bag had a hidden camera recording every corner of the bank. Her boyfriend was planning to rob the bank, and Tina was helping him. Stanley, being completely innocent, had no idea. He was simply captivated by Tina's beauty. He turned to his friend and said, "Wow, what a girl! Totally amazing." But his friend replied, "Forget it, man." That night, there was a party, and there would be plenty of stunning people there. Suddenly, Stanley remembered his car was broken. When he went to the garage, the mechanic said it would take time to fix it. If he really needed a car, he could take the mechanic's own vehicle. But the mechanic's car was absolutely terrible. With no other option, Stanley had to take that worthless car. When he reached the party location, the guards wouldn't let him in. They said, "This place isn't for losers like you. Come back when you've got money." Stanley felt humiliated and turned back. On the way home, near a bridge, his junky car broke down again. He was already frustrated, and now he was filled with anger. He got out of his car and looked at the water in the dark night. For a moment, he thought there might be a dead body floating there. Then he wondered if it could be a living person. Without thinking twice, he dove into the water. Once he reached the water, he realized it wasn't a person at all. It was a pile of trash floating in the water. But there, lying among the debris, he found the green mask that had appeared earlier in the story. Stanley was fascinated by it. The design was antique and mysterious, and it felt as if this mask could be a key to a hidden secret. So he happily took the mask home with him. Stanley also had a dog. The moment the dog saw the mask, it started barking loudly. Stanley managed to calm his dog down somehow, and then stood in front of the mirror, thinking, "Let's try this and see how it looks on me." As soon as he put the mask on, it stuck to his face. He tried hard to remove it, but it wouldn't budge. It seemed as if the mask had completely fused with his face. Stanley's face turned completely green, and his behavior changed drastically. It was as if Stanley wasn't standing there anymore, someone else had taken over. He started dancing in bizarre ways, and his agility had increased dramatically. When he stepped out of his apartment, a woman saw him and got terrified. Her face was also covered with a green facial mask. But Stanley now looked like a full-on cartoon character. The woman, scared out of her mind, pulled out a gun. Stanley, to avoid her, jumped straight out of the window. He wasn't sure from which floor, and as he hit the ground, he started bouncing like a crazy ball. Suddenly, he landed right in front of a car on the road. The driver honked loudly. Stanley said, "All right, honker, you can only honk. That's it." He took a small horn out of his pocket. But the moment he pressed it, the tiny horn exploded with a massive bang. The sound was so loud that all the car windows shattered. The poor driver's hair stood on end. Then Stanley went to the mechanic who was fixing his car, the same mechanic whose terrible vehicle had caused him so much embarrassment. He destroyed everything in rage and later went back home and slept as if nothing had happened. After all the crazy antics, he was exhausted. The next morning, when Stanley woke up, his face was back to normal. Somehow the mask had come off. Looking at himself in the mirror, fragments of the night came back to him. He thought maybe it was all just a dream.
Just then, someone knocked on the door. It was a police officer. He asked, "Do you remember anything from last night?" The woman who had been terrified by Stanley the night before was also with the officer. She claimed that a man with a green mask had been roaming around the area and looked extremely scary. Stanley realized they were talking about him, but said, "Sir, I don't know anything. I was sleeping peacefully." Hearing this, the police officer left. Stanley picked up the mask and said, "This thing is making me do crazy stuff. I don't feel right wearing it." Saying that, he threw the mask out the window and walked out of the room himself. but the mask somehow returned to the room on its own. Later, Stanley went to his office. The bank manager scolded him harshly. "Why are you late? This is your father's bank." Stanley explained, "Sir, I wasn't feeling well. I didn't sleep properly last night." But the manager didn't care and kept lecturing him even more. Back at home, Stanley was very sad and completely silent. Then his eyes fell on a newspaper. There was a picture of Tina, who was a singer, performing live at the same extravagant club where he had been kicked out the other night. Stanley decided, no matter what, I'm going to get into that club. But the problem was that the entry was only for the wealthy. The tickets were so expensive that he couldn't afford them. Then his eyes fell on that green mask again. It was still lying on his sofa. He was surprised, thinking, I threw this out. But then Stanley thought, maybe this mask came into his life to help him. He decided to give it another try and put the mask on again. The moment he wore it, his face turned green once more. As if by magic, his clothes also seemed to change, and he immediately headed to the same bank where he worked, this time to cause a heist so he could use the stolen money to get entry into the club. Stanley reached the bank, but Tina's accomplices were already there. In fact, they had planned to rob the bank that very day. The group was standing outside wondering how to pull off the theft when Stanley suddenly smashed through the glass of the bank and leaped outside, scolding everyone standing there. "You think you can just rob a bank? I'm coming after you," he yelled. Then, in a flash, he ran away faster than anyone could even see. Soon the police arrived at the club, mistaking the black-clad gang for the thieves, and started firing at them. The gang returned fire and took the opportunity to escape. Meanwhile, Stanley reached the club in a very long limousine. He handed a huge amount of money to the bouncer and walked inside. Inside the bar, Tina was performing live, singing her heart out. Stanley went up to her and started dancing, fully enjoying the moment. Tina was loving Stanley's incredible, lightning-fast moves. She even assumed he must be a very rich man. At that moment, Tina's friends, the same ones planning the bank robbery, also arrived at the club. The gang informed their leader that the man dancing with Tina was the one who had robbed the bank. On the leader's command, everyone started shooting at Stanley, but Stanley was faster than lightning and no bullet could reach him. Soon, the police also arrived at the club. They told Tina's accomplices, "We saw you at the bank earlier, and now you're openly firing guns in a bar. You're putting the public at risk. That's a serious crime." The police arrested everyone and said, "If we get proof that you didn't rob the bank, you'll be released later." Tina's friend Dorian, the gang leader, said, "Proof? That will only happen when they find the green-faced man. He's the real thief." Then a police officer noticed a piece of Stanley's tie and remembered, "I've seen a tie like this on that flat guy." The officer began to suspect that Stanley might have committed the bank robbery. After all, he worked at the bank, which would make the theft easier for him. Besides, with his salary, he couldn't normally afford to enter the club, since it was only for the wealthy. The officer immediately went to Stanley's home and asked, "Is this your tie? Tell me how you got into that club. You're just a regular bank employee." Stanley lied and said, "I didn't go to the bar at all. I was just looking for my tie. Thank you for finding it. Looks like it got stolen." The next day, when Stanley went to the bank, his boss scolded him again. This time, Stanley snapped and said, "Don't yell at me again, or I'll seriously hit you." At that moment, Tina came into the bank to meet Stanley. She asked, "You meet so many new people every day. Do you know anyone with a green face?" She thought maybe he was talking about someone who had painted their face. Stanley didn't tell her the truth either. He said, "Yes, I know him. If you want, I can even arrange for you to meet him tonight." Tina was thrilled, and they fixed a time and place to meet. Stanley went home and thought, "I need to find out something about this mask." He took it to a mask expert, someone who knew almost everything about masks from around the world. The expert explained that there was a god named Loki who was extremely mischievous and playful. He had a mask with powers similar to what Stanley was describing. Stanley said, "Yes, maybe this is that very mask. Whenever I wear it, I'm not myself anymore. I act completely different, doing strange things. I have no idea what I'll do next." To prove his point, Stanley put the mask on right in front of the expert. But nothing happened. Frustrated, the expert said, "Don't waste my time. Get out of here." Stanley realized that maybe the mask only worked at night or when he was alone. It was now nighttime and he had to go meet Tina. He put the mask on and soon arrived at the place, but the police were already there. They had been keeping an eye on him. The police surrounded both Tina and Stanley. Tina got scared and ran away. Stanley pretended to freeze in place, but in the excitement of the mask's power, he forgot that the police could still see him. The officers closed in from all sides. Then Stanley let out a strange, terrifying yell. His screams seemed to shake everyone's minds, and the magic of the charismatic mask took control over them. 2 seconds later, the police officers were dancing with him. Taking advantage of the chaos, Stanley ran across the street and removed the mask. Now he was back to being completely normal Stanley. Just then, a girl arrived in a car. She was Stanley's friend. Seeing Stanley a little frightened, she got him into her car. The girl was a professional reporter. She said, "I'm going to tell the world your story. Tell me exactly what happened." Stanley, being an honest, straightforward guy, told her everything truthfully. "I have a mask. Whenever I wear it, I completely change. Now even the police are looking for me." But the story took a dangerous twist. Stanley didn't know that the reporter girl was actually deceiving him. In reality, she was working with Dorian's gang. Dorian had paid the reporter to bring him to Stanley, promising her a huge reward in return. Soon the gangsters captured Stanley and tortured him. They hung him upside down. Not long after, Dorian arrived and started interrogating Stanley. "Tell me how this mask works. If you don't, you'll die." Stanley said, "Hey brother, you could have asked nicely. I'd have told you anyway. Just let me go. Wear this mask and you'll understand everything yourself." As soon as Dorian put the mask on, his face immediately turned bright green. Now he looked like a dangerous villain. A different kind of power had come into him. He decided that under no circumstances would he give this mask to anyone else. He was also afraid that if the police saw him wearing the green mask, they would think he was the real Green Masked Man. He planned to plant a duplicate mask in Stanley's pocket and have him arrested. He sent his goons to Stanley's house to retrieve the money Stanley had supposedly stolen from the bank. But Stanley's dog was secretly watching everything. The dog saw that his master was tied up in the car, his mouth taped shut. When the thieves took the money and left, Stanley's dog, Milo, quietly followed them. Meanwhile, Dorian had made a fake mask. Following his plan, he placed it in Stanley's pocket. The idea was that the police would believe Stanley was the real Green Masked Man. Dorian's men then picked up Stanley and dropped him right in front of the police. The officers found the mask in his pocket and, without thinking, sent him straight to jail. When Tina found out, she went to visit Stanley in jail. This time, Stanley told her everything truthfully. "Actually, I'm the green-faced man who was dancing wildly with you that day, but I no longer have the mask. Your friend took the real one. He's a very dangerous man. You'll have to stop him." Stanley explained, "As far as I can tell, the mask's power affects the wearer's mind. I'm a simple, innocent guy, so I act funny and do strange things. But Dorian is a completely worthless man. Now he's not just going to rob banks, he'll loot the entire city. He'll destroy everything." Tina said, "How can I stop him alone? I was planning to leave the city anyway." But Stanley's words made her realize just how dangerous Dorian was, and she decided she would never meet him again. After that, she left the jail, but Dorian grew suspicious. He sent his goons after Tina. Meanwhile, Stanley's dog, Milo, had followed the goons all the way to the jail. The guard there was asleep, so Milo quietly took the keys from his pocket and freed Stanley from the lockup. Just then, a police officer arrived, but Stanley pointed a gun at the police officer and seized the opportunity to escape the jail. Elsewhere, Dorian had kidnapped Tina, and now, wearing the mask, he had become extremely dangerous. His face looked even greener, more terrifying, and stranger than Stanley's. He went to a bar filled with gangsters, where the city's most notorious criminals were present. He declared, "From today, I am your leader. If anyone has a problem, come face me." But the gangsters didn't like this and started shooting at Dorian. But with the mask's power, he absorbed all the bullets and then released them from his body, taking out all the attackers. After that, he tied up Tina and planted a time bomb on her, saying, "Now try to escape from here. You were deceiving me, right?"
Just then, Stanley arrived. Tina, pretending to be innocent, told Dorian, "I admit I made a mistake, but before I die, can I kiss your real face just once?" Poor Dorian slipped and removed the mask, but it was all part of Tina's plan. Taking advantage of the moment, Tina kicked the mask hard. It flew into the air and Milo caught it. Now Stanley's dog Milo wore the mask. He became extremely dangerous. He began tearing Dorian's men apart, ripping their shirts and causing chaos everywhere. Stanley then picked up Milo and said, "Champion, now it's my turn."
After much effort, Stanley finally removed the mask from his dog. He was about to put it on himself when Dorian's men arrived and started shooting at Stanley. A bullet hit the mask and it flew away. Stanley immediately ran over and put the mask on. Now Stanley had become bulletproof. He had no worries at all. He drank a glass of juice, but wherever the bullets had hit him, juice started squirting out from those spots. Everyone watching was completely shocked. Then, Stanley calmly went to Tina. He removed the bomb from her body and swallowed it. As soon as the timer reached 0, an explosion went off inside his stomach, but the mask was so powerful that nothing happened to Stanley. Just then, Dorian came to attack Stanley, but Stanley threw him into the water and turned a nearby tree into a toilet handle. Written on the handle was the word flush. As soon as Stanley twisted the handle, Dorian was flushed straight into the water. With Dorian washed away, the entire city was safe from his tyranny. Stanley had also saved Tina. Then, the police arrived and were about to arrest Stanley. But a man who had been there earlier said, "I am the mayor. Why are you arresting him? He saved everyone. The real criminal went somewhere, probably into the water." The police saw Milo carrying the green mask and said, "Look, the dog is taking the mask somewhere." The mayor angrily said, "Don't focus on the dog, find the real criminal, understood?" Following the mayor's order, the police released Stanley and started capturing Dorian's gang members. The next morning, Stanley, Tina, and Milo went to the bridge where Stanley had first found the mask. Standing by the sea, Stanley said, "This mask has given me a lot, but now it can't give me what I truly want." He confessed his love to Tina, saying, "I thought maybe you only loved the masked version of me, not the real Stanley." Tina smiled and said, "I like you just the way you are." She took the mask from Stanley and threw it into the sea. Finally, our hero got his heroine. Everything ended perfectly. See you in the next video.